We'll give it another second, but I think we might be rolling. I hope. This is a first for the Matzevah Foundation, so if you're out there watching on Facebook, we appreciate your patience.
There's a delay, isn't there?
Yeah, I figured there probably is a delay.
Yeah, okay.
But that's good. We'll give it another second or two, and then we will launch into it, just for people to...
We have 2 viewers.
Yay. Hello, 2 viewers.
It's probably you two.
It's probably us, but yeah.
Probably. We know you're not. We know you're not there on Facebook, except on the screen. Now there are 3.
I do like your setup, Kevin.
Thank you.
Okay, I got to close this window.
All right. Well, we can just start launching into our chats. So hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this video. Hopefully the technology is working and that it will be our friend tonight, because this is the first time we're trying this, hooking a Zoom call up to Facebook. So hopefully it is working. And if it's not working, we will post the video afterwards. So if you're watching and if you should have a question for us, feel free to post it on our Facebook page down below, and we'll check it as we go, and we'll try to catch those. And so our hope for this video chat is for you to get to know the Matzevah Foundation and about our work in Poland. So typically we're busy in Poland this time of the year over the summer, but of course we had to cancel all of our work due to COVID. And so we're hoping that this video provides a way of staying in touch with you. And for those of you who might be newer to following us in our work, that is a chance for you to get to know us a little bit more. So the 3 of us that are here tonight, we're 3 members of the Matzevah Foundation. We have Steven Reece, Kevin Little, and I am Rachel McRae. So how about we just start off with a quick introduction for each of ourselves. You can tell us where you live, what you do, what your role is with the Matzevah Foundation, just whatever you want to share. So Steven, since you're our grand poobah, why don't you start off?
Hello, my name is Steven Reece. I live in Atlanta, Georgia with my wife. My 4 children also live in the city here as well, and we have a granddaughter. I am a recent graduate. I graduated my doctorate recently in May, and that's about it for now.
Well, that sounds like plenty. And what do you do for the Matzevah? Did you say what you did?
I'm the president. I'm the founder and the president, or founder and CEO, however you want to call it.
Whatever we want to call you on this day.
Yeah.
All right, Kevin, how about you?
I think first of all, you need to introduce yourself as Dr. Steven Reece.
Yes.
Very well earned, and we're all very, very happy for you. My name is Kevin Little. I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I work for a bank here. I do mortgage lending. And on the side, I dabble in some cemetery restoration projects through the Matzevah Foundation. Being that I work at a bank, I always get nominated to be the treasurer. People, I guess, assume that I'm good with money, or that I won't steal it, or something like that. So I'm the happy treasurer. I've been doing that for, gosh, since we founded. So
Very cool.
I live here with my wife, my couple of animals. So
very cool. And I am Rachel, and I also live in Nashville, just on the other end of the county from Kevin. And I work for a book publisher in Michigan. However, I live in Nashville because, frankly, Michigan gets too cold, and I'm a Southerner, so I have stayed down south. But for Matzevah, I am the director of communications, and so I work with our social media and our newsletters and things like that. So we have a board that has several different people on it. So there's others that are part of our organization that live also in Atlanta and throughout Nashville. And we have a board member in Poland. So Szymek, hello if you're up late. So hello to Szymek. He lives in Warsaw. So that kind of makes up our board. So thank you. So one of the questions I want to ask I guess really each of us is what first took you to Poland? And about how many times have you been to Poland, if you can count up that many? So Steven, let's start with you. What first took you to Poland?
I went to Poland in December 1988 with a group of Baptist men to visit Baptist churches in Poland and what was then the Soviet Union. We went to Belarus, to Minsk, and to Brest, and to Warsaw and Białystok. So that was my first time to go to Poland. I don't know how many times I've actually been to Poland. I've lost count, but I lived there for 12 years. My family, my youngest son was born there. So I've been going to Poland every year since 2011, and sometimes at least twice a summer, staying up to 2.5, 3 months at a time.
Yeah, so this is your first summer in many years that you haven't spent time in Poland, isn't it?
That's right. It's the first time since 2011 that I've not been to Poland.
Crazy pandemic.
Yes.
Kevin, how about you? What first took you to Poland?
So I first went to Poland in 2006 through Brentwood Baptist Church here in the Nashville area. Just saw something in the bulletin about Jewish cemetery work in Warsaw, Poland, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. I've never done missionary work amongst graveyards. So growing up, I've always had a fascination for history. As a Christian, I've always been interested in just the Jewish roots of Christianity and just kind of what that looks like today as far as being a Christian. And so I went to Poland in 2006 for the first time and just fell in love with not just the work that we do, but the people, the culture of where we go and what we do. So I've been every year since 2006, except I believe 2 years. So I think this year would have been my 13th year to go.
Nice. And my experience is very similar to yours because I first went in 2007 with a group from the same church to work with Steven while he was still living in Warsaw. And also kind of like Kevin, you know, I've always had an interest for some reason in Eastern Europe, and especially during the Holocaust for a long time. I think it started back in when I was in middle school. But the draw to visit Poland for me began back probably more when I was in college. And I took a class on the Holocaust. And for some reason, I just learned more about Poland then. And I just thought, you know, one day I would love to visit there. So I think it was about 9 years later, I finally made my first trip. And that first project was, I think, Kevin's second trip there.
My first one as a leader.
Your first one as a leader, and you got us all there and back in one piece. So that was a success.
That's right.
Yeah, that first project was in Oatbox, Poland, which is just a suburb of Warsaw. And after a week, I was just totally hooked on Jewish cemetery restoration work and remembrance. And I've now been back, I think, 11 times to Poland and once to Ukraine to work with our friends at Roatin Jewish Heritage. So hello to Jay and Marla if you are watching. So yeah, and the same is true for our board members. All of them, I think, have been anywhere from 6 or 7 times up to, I think, Joanne's been maybe 13 or 14 times now. So our board has definitely covered a lot of miles. So we have definitely been a lot. So Steven, how did the idea of the Matzevah Foundation get started? Because it definitely started with you several years ago.
Okay. Also, Szymek lives in Poland City.
He wins.
He just has to travel from place to place wherever we work. Do you want me to talk about how I began working in cemeteries, how that happened, or how?
However you would like to start. Yeah, that's always a good spot to start.
Okay. I was working in Poland as a Baptist pastor with the Baptist Union of Poland. I began in 1997. And of course, living in Poland, learning the language, reading history, learning culture, visiting places, and so forth, I became very familiar with the history of Poland and, sadly, the history of World War II. And especially since I lived in Warsaw, I was very much in that vicinity and went to places where I had seen bullet holes and pot marks from the war and so forth, places that hadn't yet been restored. And so in 2004, I had a group of Baptist volunteers, much like Rachel and Kevin, who had come to work with the Baptist Church in Norfolk, and they were staying in a hotel. And in that hotel, there were two waitresses, and one of them took an interest in the group and would speak to me and ask me a great many questions because she couldn't speak English, and she was curious about the group and who we were and what we're doing. And I told her what we were doing, and she said to me at the time, she said, "You know, that I really like what you're doing for our community, for our city. It's really good." And then toward the end of the week, she pulled me aside and said, "Listen, I think this group to see the Jewish cemetery." And I said, "There's a Jewish cemetery here?" And she said, "Yes, not far from this hotel. And I said, okay. And then I asked her a very polite and difficult question. I asked her, I said, Madam, are you of Jewish origins? And she said, yes, I am. And then she added, there are many of us here in hiding. And at the time, that struck me very strongly, because this was 2004. And broaching a matter like that to a stranger, for one person to bring it up, was a huge risk, and I knew it. And so it really stirred me, and I began to think about it. Why did she say this to me, and what do I need to do about it? So I prayed about it. I thought about it. I started looking a little bit at Jewish cemeteries and trying to figure out why would this even be important to me to consider as a Christian, as a Baptist pastor. And so eventually I took a group to see this cemetery in the forest just outside of Oak Forks, and there it was there. And what I saw was an overgrown patch of ground with some headstones sticking up here and there. And I thought, wow, what would it look like if I brought Baptist volunteers to work in this cemetery? So that led to a series of questions that I had to answer: how to do it, what kind of permission, and so forth, which ultimately led me to meet with the chief rabbi Poland's office, which I did in March 2005. And I explained to the chief rabbi's representative what I wanted to do, and by bringing Baptist volunteers to clean up this Jewish cemetery. He said, why would you want to do that? And I gave him a one-word answer in Polish, which was pojednanie, reconciliation. And he said, okay. And so that's how I began working in Jewish cemeteries. And then I invited volunteers like from churches like Kevin and Rachel's church, Britain Baptist Church, and they came and we worked for a week or so in each cemetery in Oak Forks, primarily for 3 summers. And then the 4th summer we worked somewhere else. But anyway, all that to say is that by the time 2008 had come, my family and I needed to return home to take care of my wife's parents. And so we did, and I looked for what to do going forward, and a series of events led me to the conclusion that I needed to return and to somehow start an organization to continue the work. And then toward the latter part of 2010, I spoke to former volunteers who had come to work with us over the years, like Kevin and Rachel, and I told them what I had in mind. And eventually we raised the money and a group to become the founding board members, and the funds to hire a lawyer and help us establish and incorporate the Matzevah Foundation, which we did in December 2010. Any questions? Anything else I need to add?
I think that's good. It's hard to believe we turned 10 years old this December. So it seems like yesterday, but it's also, we turned double digits. So hopefully you'll be hearing more from us as we get ready to mark that anniversary later in the year and on into 2021. So of course, COVID changes, some of those plans that we were hoping to do, but we'll figure out ways to celebrate virtually and together as we can. So Kevin, we always talk about, our work kind of comprises of 3 things: Jewish cemetery restoration work, commemorations of maybe forgotten mass graves, and education. And of course, our work mostly has stemmed from working in a Jewish cemetery. And so since you've done 12 or 13 of these by now, can you kind of share with us, what does a typical work week look like when we go to a cemetery? What does that kind of look like? What are some of the things we do? How do we go about the work, and what do we use, and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would love to. And I mean, first of all, whenever we pull up to a cemetery on the first day, most people don't realize the amount of work that's gone in just to get us to that point, right? So as a board, we meet in March, and we kind of finalize whatever cemeteries that we're going to go to. In a typical year, Steven will then fly to Poland. He'll kind of go to different cemeteries. Like he said, he'll secure the different, if there's different things that need to be secured to the cemeteries, permissions and things like that with the local authorities. So there is a good amount of legwork that goes into just getting us, inside the cemetery. And, you know, typical cemetery, some of them have walls, some of them do not. But generally, you know, we will go out. We try to go out on the Sunday before we begin work on Monday. We'll kind of scope things out, and it's always the same. Everybody pulls up, and, you know, volunteers, you know, you see it and you're like, oh my gosh, like this looks like a jungle. What are we going to do? And so we all take pictures like, hey, look, we're in front of a jungle. And we walk through and we just see how just uncared for the cemeteries are. And you know, by that time we've not worked at all. So we're kind of like, oh, I don't want to get dirty. Like, you know, these are I don't want to get my shoes on, you know. So that's just kind of what everybody's kind of feeling on that Sunday, kind of when we go to scope it out and get eyes on it. And then Monday when we get there, we pull out all the equipment that we have, which really isn't a whole lot. It normally consists of about 15 to 20 loppers. So, you know, some cutting tools. We now have, I think 4 or 5 different weed eaters, or not just weed eaters, but, you know, equipment that can also cut decent size, you know, something like the size of your thumb, as far as with some electrical equipment that will do that, instead of us having to do all the manpower. We'll have some shovels, we'll have some rakes, we have some tarps. We'll kind of set up camp when we walk in. We'll set up a tarp, kind of protect all of our stuff, and then we'll get to work. So most people I find really love to lop, right? Lopping's the fun part, if you can, of Jewish cemetery work, because you cut it down and you move to the next one, you cut it down, you move to the next one, you cut it, and so you just go through and you really feel like, you know, you're conquering the cemetery. And then the unfun part of the job is dragging. Nobody wants to drag because it's a drag. Dragging is a drag. Is all you do. You pick up this pile and you carry it, you know, 20, 30, 40, 50 yards. And then you get to where I'm normally at, and I'm normally the pile guy. So I'll get all, you know, the limbs and trees and everything that are being cut down, and I just start piling them up for, you know, hopefully somebody to come and mulch them. And so really we just kind of, you know, we start working, and, you know, we'll normally, you know, decide, okay, we're going to start on the front left corner and we're going to go out this way. And so we'll just start, and, you know, Monday we get started and we're like, wow, you know, we really got a lot done. And you already look back at the picture from Sunday to Monday and you're like, holy cow, like this already looks totally different. And so then Tuesday and Wednesday, and normally by about Wednesday you're like, oh, like after the third day you're like, I am tired. And then by this time I'm thinking, Steven's been doing like 3 or 4 of these trips, and I'm only on my first one, and I'm flat worn out, and yet he's, you know, still happy to go. And then, you know, so we'll work hard for 4 days, and Friday we'll normally work half a day because of Shabbat. And Friday is normally just, we kind of wrap things up. When you go back and you look at the picture that you took on Sunday, and you look at the pictures on Friday, and you're like, this is not the same place. Like, you know, wow, look at the difference we made just by cutting some things down, just by caring for this place. So to me, that, you know, that's generally what a normal week is going to look like.
That's good. And the dragging is no joke. When I was in ROA team, there was one day I had my phone on me the whole time for whatever reason. And, you know, iPhones will track your steps count. And I remember looking at it that day, and I had done about right at 3 miles just in the little cemetery of back and forth from lopping to the brush pile. Wow. And when you think about August heat in Ukraine or in Poland, and just carrying, you know, pounds of brush, that was a hard-earned 3 pounds. And I'm pretty sure we treated ourselves with some pizza and ice cream that night, so it was well earned.
And I failed to mention, you know, the thorns and yes. The stinging nettle. Yes. And a couple years ago, I got stung by hornets, and they're like, you know, like, so yeah, you get to deal with that fun stuff. And, you know, the other thing that we used to do that I loved so much was when we go in the cemeteries and the tombstones would be knocked over, and we would go and we would get to turn those over. And it was so exciting getting to feel like you're taking something that no one can see, and you just turn it over, and wow, you know, like there's somebody's life, like, you know, right there. So I've always enjoyed when we get to, you know, do that as well.
Yeah, there's always, you know, a lot of aspects during the week, whether it's your first time there, or if it's a volunteer's first time there, or you've been there 10 or 12 times, there's always a lot of meaningful aspects to our project. And when I think about them as a whole, for me, there's always kind of two aspects that happen on each project that I love. And one of them is what you just mentioned, Kevin, is, just when you just see the transformation of the cemetery during the week of work, like you said, when we arrive early in the week, it's just so overgrown with tall vegetation. Sometimes there's just a lot of trash in there, depending on where it might be located. And like you said, it can be overwhelming. And I know sometimes I've just felt depressed by it. I'm just like, oh, it just hurts your heart to see a cemetery of any kind treated this way with trash or just overgrown with just vegetation. But as the week progresses, like you say, the space just opens up and you can start seeing the ground. You can uncover the Matzevah or the headstones. And as you clean off the moss and dirt, that's maybe collected on the headstone, is just really cool. And I definitely cannot read Hebrew, but I always find myself, taking my gloved finger and just kind of tracing over the name of the person of whose headstone that is. And I just kind of always welcome them back to the light. Hey, you've been covered up in moss or with grass and trees this whole time, and, kind of welcome back to being visible. And, so by the end of the week, there's always, a whole view of names that, people can come by and see it who live there as they walk by the cemetery. And another part that's always meaningful to me is just when local people from the town stop by while we're working, whether they just kind of pop their head over the fence to see what we're doing. They're hearing the machines, they're hearing people talking, they're hearing Americans talking, going, what are Americans doing? We're hearing people with French accents or Canadian accents, there. And sometimes people come in, pick up a tool and join us for a couple hours of work. And it always means so much when, people join us, because that's one of our primary desires, I think, as an organization is, to have the local community have a renewed interest in the cemetery and want to care for it. So when local people come out to volunteer, that goes a long way to help build, new connections and interests in the cemetery. And then hopefully they'll have more connection with the Jewish history that their town has, because so many towns all over Poland and Eastern Europe have such a rich Jewish heritage. So it's really cool when the local community, gets involved. And like I said, other than cemetery restorations, we also participate in a handful of commemorations. And so a lot of those are of forgotten mass graves. So Steven, can you tell us, how do we locate those areas? Who do we work with to do that? And what's kind of a brief overview of what that process is to commemorate a mass grave that might be found throughout Poland?
Okay, a couple things. We work very closely with the Rabbinical Commission for Matters of Cemeteries in Poland. I've been schooled and trained and in the halakha and the treatment of cemeteries and the dead and so forth. And out of that association of the Matzevah Foundation, my work with the Rabbinical Commission and the Matzevah's work with the Rabbinical Commission, a few years back, the Rabbinical Commission members inside the commission decided to form an organization to deal specifically with mass graves, because mass graves of forgotten Jewish victims have no matzevah, have no stone, have no one to remember them. And so the Fundacja Zapomniane, the Foundation of the Forgotten, was established in 2015, and we began to partner with them, talk with them about working. And so with them to commemorate mass graves. The way they locate these, first of all, is through archival work in the Polish archives. Sadly, many mass executions and murders and so forth of Jewish victims are documented. Sometimes they're documented and the location of the graves are not specifically known. Sometimes local residents in areas where they know that there's been mass shootings and so forth and burials, they may know where the graves are. They'll contact Fundacja Zapomniane, and then they will begin to build a database. And then to locate the mass graves, what they do is they have to have firsthand eyewitness testimony or testimony that can specifically locate the mass grave somewhere in a particular location, not just in the forest, but by that tree, that rock, and so forth. And so once they have a pretty good idea of where the grave is, they'll conduct further research to see if there's any aerial photographs possibly made during the war, Nazi aerial photographs, or if LiDAR images have been made that allow them to look at the terrain to possibly see features that relate to mass grave sites. And then once they have a pretty good idea, either by eyewitness testimony, archival research, or a combination of all those things, a ground survey will be conducted using ground penetrating radar. And they will try to determine the topography and the actual lay of the mass grave in relationship to the surrounding area. And once they have all those factors in place, then the second thing, what we've been doing with them is placing wooden Matzevah, wooden markers, to locate the mass graves, basically as placeholders until a time that possibly we can place a commemorative stone. We have worked with Fudate Zapomniani to date to place 3 Matzevot in 3 locations. And we had planned to do 2 this year, but because of COVID, we were not able to do it. And so for us, one of the things that's important for me to say about the Matzevah itself is that it's a stone upon which the memory, the lives of people are written. And so when we commemorate a mass grave, when we erect a Matzevah, what we're doing is we're bringing back to life, to memory, the lives of people who do not have anyone to speak for them. So in essence, we're doing justice. Sadiqat, we're doing justice for those who have no one to speak for them, to speak of the injustice that happened to them. So that's one way that we remember, and we act by commemorating it in partnership with the Matzevah, with Fudate Zapomniani or others. Mostly every one of these events that we've been involved with to date have involved the local community, government, activists, and so forth. So it is a very holistic and restorative act that we publicly host a ceremony, and maybe a local priest or a bishop or someone like that, one of the rabbis from Warsaw, me or someone else will speak, and school children will come. They'll light candles, they'll lay flowers, and people will speak, and there'll be a ceremony, and it's a very moving experience.
Very cool. Thank you. Just checking our Facebook feed, and just thank you so much to those of you who are watching and for some fun comments. Carol, thank you for saying that you appreciate our work. Just very grateful. Hey, Dan, yes, we agree with you that the thorns and the nettles are a beast for sure. So thank you so much for those of you who are piping in. It's good to hear from you. I'd love for each of us to share about maybe a favorite memory from one of the trips, whether it's about, the aspect of something from the actual work or the people we've met, or even something about the food or whatever. What's a favorite memory that you might have? And Kevin, we'll start with you.
Oh, I love food. That's actually not the only thing that I love about Poland, but wow, I mean, come on, kielbasa and pierogi and lodi, and not to mention, just as many potatoes as you could ever imagine wanting to eat. But as I thought about kind of what my favorite memories are, I've had the opportunity to go to Poland with both of my parents on separate trips, with my dad and with my mom. The first year I went to Poland, my dad came, and it was just we were both just like, what in the world is going on? And Steven still remembers he loved to drink him some Diet Coke, and he wanted that mustard with extra smack. And then a few years later, Rachel and I had the opportunity to do a mommy and me trip, as both of our moms went to Poland with us. And both of those memories, as I think about it with my parents, just getting to experience doing work like this with them is really meaningful to me, and definitely something that I'll take with me for the rest of my life. Outside of that, I would say the most memorable time I had that still gives me chills when I think about it was 2 years ago, or I guess 3 years ago now, when we worked in the cemetery in Sheroshel for the first time. And at the end of our work, I mean, we worked with a group of descendants, and they were, we had some people from Israel, we had some people from Philadelphia and from New York, and even some of those had moved from South Africa and Rhodesia. Hello, John and Rena, and Bernie and Callie, if you're watching us. but we had the opportunity to work with them, and then there was people from all over America, from California, hello Hattie B, and so it was just such an eclectic group of people, and it was really touching. And by the end of the week, Bernie was a cantor for his synagogue, and so at the end of our week, he read and sang a prayer. We all gathered together, and these people are all related, 5th, 6th, 7th, 10th generations. And I just remember all of us just sitting there and just weeping, and it was just so meaningful, just being in that cemetery while he was singing and praying to those of his ancestors who were buried in that place. And it was just like, wow, like this is why we do what we do. And so to me, is the most vivid memory that I have of being in polling and doing our work.
That's good. Steven, how about you?
I'll just tag to Kevin and Shadosh. One of the things that we strive to do is to work with descendants to connect them with local communities wherever they may be. And it's not always possible to do that. But in Shadosh and several other places, we've been able to do that. And so it's meaningful to me whenever descendants are able to go to their ancestral cemeteries and they're able to clear and then to recover, clear and find Matzevah that may have been hidden partially or buried, or like Kevin said earlier, on their face, and they're able to turn them up and recover vital information that's lost. And to see how much of an impact that has on them and the diaspora community, because in Shadosh, for example, they were using, I forget the program, Locate a Grave or Find a Grave or something like that, some program that they could take a picture of the actual Matzevah. It would have a GPS, and then they would location. Then they would add the textual information, translating from Hebrew into English, and then I guess ultimately into Hebrew or whatever language. And that way, people were recovering, families recovering lost information of loved ones, because the records all were destroyed in the Shoah. Unfortunately, they were lost, and so the Matzevah themselves retain that vital information. And so, oftentimes, people are able to recover that information, and that's part of the restorative effort that we seek to achieve by linking descendants with these local communities in areas where these cemeteries are located, and try to mutually work together with the communities in such a way that type of restoration occurs.
Yeah, that's very cool. For me, I, have, too many memories to, tell here, but one that I think of a lot for whatever reason happened in 2014 when we were in Ospensham, and that was my first trip to Ospensham. I've done 3 projects there, but that was my first one. And our team that week was made up of volunteers from the US, Poland, Germany, Ukraine, Belgium, and I think maybe Russia.
And Bulgaria.
In Bulgaria, thank you. And in the last day of work, we'd been working in the cemetery all week long, but that last day we went to patch some holes that had developed on the outside of the wall of the cemetery. And the cemetery there is on a pretty main road in Ospensham, so there was plenty of cars and people on foot going by and kind of looking at us really curiously, like, what are y'all doing? And getting in our way of the sidewalk and things like that. About midway through the work that day, an older lady in a red beret stopped by, and she told me, she did speak a little bit of English, and I was able to make out that she was saying, that every day she walks by the Jewish cemetery on her way to church to pray. And she always wondered, why was no one there to work to care for the cemetery, to restore the cemetery? And she was just so delighted to see so many young people, because we were working with these high school students from around Europe who were in Ospensham for the summer. And she was just so happy to see so many young people working. And she just kept holding on to my arm and just repeated, my heart is so happy, my heart is so happy. And the next thing I know, she lets go of my arm, and she grabs one of the young men and starts showing him how to better fill in the holes with the mortar. She got a little bit of it on her hand and started to spread it on the wall. And it was just such a beautiful moment for me. This lady may have been old enough to possibly been alive during the war, and I wondered, if she was, what kind of history she may have seen as a young child. And now here she was filling holes of the cemetery wall of a Jewish cemetery with a Polish teenager. And it was just a beautiful picture for me. And every time I've gone back to Ospensham, I always rub my hand on that spot where she worked and remember her. And so don't know, I think her name was Francesca, but I will just always remember her. She was just a dear lady who was just so pleased to see that we were there working and that we remembered. And so let me check our questions.
What's your favorite color? What's your favorite ice cream flavor?
My favorite ice cream, which in Polish is called lodi, is definitely lemon. They have amazing lemon ice cream there. Let's see. Edward James says he loves the homemade mushrooms that he had when he visited Poland. So that sounds like a good time. Kevin, your mom is watching, so hello, Miss Wanda. We have Marcia has asked, what kind of Baptist community does Poland have? Stephen, do you want to speak to that about the kind of she's aware that a lot of the country is predominantly Catholic, but she was just kind of curious as to what the Baptist population might be.
All in all, the Protestant community in Poland is small. It's 1% or less. Baptists make up across the country in the neighborhood of 10,000 or less, depending upon when they're counted and so forth. And so when there's one official Baptist church, but there are numerous congregations, roughly 80, 80 Baptist congregations spread out across the country in Northeast Poland, Central Poland, Western Poland, Northeast Poland, so Szczecin, Warsaw, Białystok, Gdańsk, Kraków. There are Baptist churches, so it's a small community, but they're there.
Yeah, that's good. And then a couple of people have typed in saying that, you know, they're aware of cemeteries in Poland that they've worked in or have visited, and just curious about how they can work to maybe get those restored, either with our help or with others. And so what I will do, we have information on our website at matzevah.org. So after this video, I'll do a fresh post on Facebook with a link to some of that information, and hopefully it provides good information. And then there's also a way to contact us after you read that. And we would love to hear from you, to hear about cemetery that you're aware of and that is important to you. We heard an amazing story from a gentleman, I think he lives outside of London, just a week or two ago. And his cemetery is actually in Russia, but it was just fascinating to learn about the history there and things like that. So we love hearing from you. So I will put some information on our Facebook page afterwards. So thank you for that. Kevin, as we start to wrap this up, what are some ways that people can support the work of the Matzevah Foundation? What are some things that you would think are easy ways that people can stay in contact with this and support our work?
Yeah, so I think some of the, obviously the easiest ones are going to be through Facebook. I believe that Miss Rachel has us now a new YouTube channel. So please feel free to go out and watch some some fun videos of some of our board members and other volunteers throughout the years. Another great way is come and volunteer with us. Come work with us. Come spend a week with us in Poland. You'll be amazed at Steven's Polish and just his leadership. And whether you're traveling in a city or whether you're out in the country, come with us, come work with us, whether you're Jewish or you're Christian or whether you're neither, and you're just, you just want to do something good that helps others. Come work with us for a week. Lastly, I would say, financially what we do is not, it's not cheap, it's not free. Our organization is both, our board is also all of our volunteers. And so most of us use our own money to go to Poland every summer. And, most of the people there have always said, so you spend your own money and your own vacation time to come do yard work in a Jewish cemetery. And it's like, yeah, we do. But, the money that's given goes 100% to the organization, whether it's, to help us with travel or help us with fuel. We're constantly having to buy new tools, whether it be new weed eaters or loppers or, just different things like that help us with our work. We're always needing extra funds for that. So I know on our website at matzevah.org, I think we give you multiple opportunities to give to our organization. So, I think that covers them all.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Any final thoughts from the two of you before we start to close out? Stephen, anything you'd like to say at the end?
That's Dr. Reece to you.
Dr. Reece, I apologize. One of these days I'll get it right. Yes, Dr. Reece. Oh, Captain, my captain.
As far as, I just want to echo what Kevin is saying, and I want to add one thing, that the reason we do what we do is because in Hebrew there is a phrase called Hesed Shel Emet, which is the giving of true loving kindness, and this is the heart of what we do is Hesed, and we do it to as a way for us to build bridges into open dialogue and work toward reconciliation as Christians with the Jewish community. So this is what we do, while we do, and why we do it. If you can help financially, we appreciate it. If you cannot, that's fine too. If you can volunteer, whatever you want to do, if you feel led to help in some way, then we'd love to hear from you. But we thank you for your participation, your attention, watching, listening, and commenting, asking questions, and so forth. So thank you very much.
Kevin, any final thoughts?
No, ma'am. Just thank you all for watching. And yeah.
And just thank you so much. And we hope to keep sharing some information. And the summer has been weird, as it has been for all of us, but we're just so grateful for how you've all stayed interested in our work, and we're hearing from more and more new people every single week. And so thank you so much for your support and your encouragement and your giving. And we look forward to staying in touch with you on Facebook and social media and our newsletters. And thank you so much for your time, and y'all have a blessed rest of your day. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Steven.
Do widzenia.
Do widzenia.